Hey everyone, I'm out here in the garage today, and as you know, I've been trying to finish this bathroom remodeling project forever, and I plan on working on that project this weekend, but instead of working on the inside of the bathroom, I ended up working on the outside of the bathroom. So stay tuned. So if you follow the bathroom remodeling project for any length of time, you'll know that I've had some issues with pests, in particular mice and rats trying to come up the sewer line and get into the crawl space. Now, recently we've been dealing with a different kind of pest, and that's a bird that's been trying to get into the exhaust vent from the outside. So how that occurred is that, as you know, when the exhaust fan's turned on, the door opens, letting the exhaust air out, and when the exhaust fan's turned off, that door is closed. Well, what happened recently is that when the exhaust fan was turned on, the door got stuck open because the shroud collapsed in on the outside. So as we know, birds are very opportunistic. This one saw an opportunity to make a home inside the exhaust vent and made its way in. Now, fortunately, my wife was home and heard the bird scurrying around in the ceiling and tapped on the ceiling and the bird took off. So since that shroud is made of just sheet metal, I was able to easily adjust it, and that'll allow the door to swing open and close like it should. But what I'm going to do as a secondary measure is put up one of these pest guards. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so here's the exit for the exhaust vent, and as you can see, the door is getting stuck open because the shroud is collapsed inward. So that's probably caused by the cold weather. Before I could install the pest guard, since we're dealing with beveled siding, I needed to fashion some trim. Okay, so I took a more mathematical approach that is probably not necessary for building the trim, but basically what I wanted to do is make sure the pest guard sat flat, so I mimicked the angle of the siding. I started by measuring the gap between the pest guard and the siding just below the first row of siding on which the pest guard sat. This measurement was 5/8 of an inch. I then measured the gap between the next row of siding and the pest guard, which was about 4 inches down. That measurement was 3/4 of an inch. 3/4 of an inch minus 5/8 of an inch is 1/8 of an inch in 4 inches. Now, using a pitch to angle calculator and 3/8 of an inch in 12 inches as the pitch, the angle is roughly 2 degrees. So not really much of an angle to be concerned about, but if you really want to get scientific, this is what I did. I had a leftover cedar 2x4, so I used it to make the trim. I started by cutting the 2 vertical pieces out of a block I'd cut square on each end using the miter saw. Here I'm setting the angle of the miter saw to 2 degrees. With the first vertical trim piece cut, all I had to do was put the miter saw back to 0 degrees to cut the second vertical trim piece. I then cut the 2 pieces down to the proper size, where one end was 5/8 of an inch tall. Here I'm test fitting the vertical trim pieces before I cut them down to their final lengths. I next cut the horizontal trim piece by making a 2-degree bevel cut in another block of cedar. This piece was 9 inches long. Sorry, it looks like I lost some footage, so all I did next was set the angle of the bevel back to 0 degrees, and then I made a straight cut to cut that horizontal piece to the proper size. One correction I later made to the horizontal trim is that I added about a 3/16 inch dado cut to the back side that sits up against the house. This will allow any water that might reach that area to run out. With the pieces all cut, I primed the backs and sides with some Benjamin Moore fast dry oil-based primer, which is critical for cedar to prevent bleed through. Since this job was unexpected, I was a little ill prepared and couldn't find the brushes I'd normally use. This one was way too small. Alright, with the pieces all primed, I centered them on the wall below the vent shroud, then nailed them in place with galvanized finish nails. I would go with at least 1.5 inch to 2 inch nails in this case. Moving on, after the primer was allowed to dry, I caulked the sides and the nail holes with some DAP 3.0 window, door, and trim caulk that is paintable after 30 minutes. I broke my caulk gun that has a drip stop a while back, so I had to use my terrible cheap backup gun. I then used a caulk tooling device to run it smooth, but a finger would work just fine in this small area. Once the caulk dried, I painted the trim. Again, I was a little ill prepared to do this job, and I didn't have my normal trim brush clean and ready to use, so I had to use a larger brush instead. I applied 2 coats of paint, observing the recommended drying time between each coat. After the paint dried, I installed the Pest guard using 4 white number 8 by 1 5/8 inch exterior wood screws. Alright, so there you have it. There's a Pest guard installation on the beveled siding. And as you saw, we broke out the miter saw, created a bunch of dust. It's always amazing to me when I'm doing little projects like that where I'm putting up pieces of trim, how much dust I create and how much material I go through just for those little pieces of trim. So hopefully this information on the Pest guard installation on beveled siding was helpful, and thanks for watching. See links in the description below. Comment, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to check us out on social media. And thanks for watching.